Alright, Jared Randall here with some news from not so far north. Well, today, not so far north, but I am north, and yeah, we're getting some snow in Michigan. Feels like early snow, even though it's a week away from Thanksgiving here in the United States. Used to be this wouldn't be a terribly early snow. Well, it wouldn't be early at all, but yeah, these days it's definitely kind of feels more like an early snow. But in any case, yeah, a lot coming in the last just this whole week, and yeah, so a lot of what I would call draconic messages coming in. There's two forces pulling one is sucking at, and one is inhabiting and trying to bring the light out of the negative polarity. And so there are two energies. There's the draconic and there's the draconian, and they're not the same. So I make that distinction because it's an important distinction. The draconic is a light compelling force coming out of the darkness. Every star has a kernel of darkness inside of it. Any one moment, there's a deepest, darkest kernel inside a star where, that's the darkest spot. In the very, 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 very middle of a star. But a star pulls towards it, and it pulls energy towards it so that it can then produce energy and shed light and push energies and push elements and push building blocks out. And then its gravity serves to then gather things in its circuit that can clump together. And if you recall, if you've watched any of my other messages, gravity and love are the same. They're the same thing. Gravity and love. They're not different. They're part of the same underlying bottommost order of this universe that we're in. And there are other universes that work differently, and there's also a negative polarity version of this universe that works differently, right? Where it's all flipped. Everything's clumped, and then everything's just getting pushed out. It's very chaotic. From our point of view, it would feel very chaotic to be there. Okay? Now, the draconic energies are from this universe, so they're working with the polarity. They are working, that energy works with the darkness, but does so to shed light, right? To bring light out. The draconian energies are trying to clump up the darkness and keep the darkness in this well of darkness that they can then suck that negative energy off of them. Because they're not from here. They're not from here. They're from that negative polarity universe, that opposite, that flip side of this universe. See? And there are ways to flip between the two. And we're living in a place, in a space where long ago these energies were, found their way in. There was activities of humans and other beings that opened up ways for them to come in. In some cases, invited them to come in, and we're living in a very dense area of that kind of activity, the draconian energies. And the draconian energies are all about fear and worry and loneliness and desperation. okay? Disassociation. So we know when we're in that energy, when our impulses are to separate, to sink down into fear and worry, to sort of live under a rock, apart from anyone else, okay? So we have to be careful. Like in the spiritual community, there's a lot of sort of this idea of hermiting up gets valorized sometimes. Sometimes it's not a positive thing, what we're doing. Sometimes we're sinking down into ourselves and we're separating off too much, right? We're separating off too much. And a lot of negative impulses in the world can start that way. For instance, in the world of Catholic Christianity, there's a positive sense of being a hermit and going off and then sort of discovering illumination and then bringing that back. But there's this negative sense of this where one goes off and one decides that everything else is evil and wrong, and one comes back in and brings in a bunch of strict rules and fear and worry. So worries about things like sexuality, worries about sensuality, worries about the masculine versus the feminine principle, and especially in that world, the feminine principle is very demonized, right? We get this whole Adam and Eve story that has changed and mutated over the millennia, and has become this very negative look towards the feminine principle, and it's a very misunderstood story. That has been then retold in ways that take that misunderstanding, and it's like a game of telephone. It just makes it worse and worse and worse. So, in any case, the draconic energies, well, there's a couple things that have been coming in. One is to understand from a draconic perspective what this reality looks like, especially at the 3D, 4D level. We live in a fractal reality, okay? And this came in, and it's come in before. If you look at pebbles, and then you go look at boulders, and then you look at bigger boulders, and you look at mountains, you're going to see the same shapes over and over at all these different scales of existence, right? All these different sizes, and things act differently at each size point, right? But also they're very, very similar. They have similarities, and we as human beings are, of a particular size compared to these things, and so we are kind of, on one hand, we have a vantage point that gives us a very specific vantage point on this reality that is something that is valuable. On another hand, we can be unaware of just how small we are. We can be unaware of just how big things can be. And, it's sort of the sense of like ants, right? The scale they're living at versus the scale a human being is living at is very different. Ants are very tuned to the level they're living at and are very good at what they do, very good at surviving at that level, very good at continuing and reproducing their lives that way, at that level. And humans are, well, I don't know if we're good at it, but we're doing it at the level we're at. I would say we're not so finely tuned at the level we're at. But at a much higher, if you will, or a level where one is able to see way more, one can perceive at the draconic scale of things. And at the draconic scale of things, we're talking about, a dragon is a being made up of many, 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 what we would think of as human souls. And human souls are already made up of many, 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 many souls. Okay? This isn't, there's a misunderstanding, say, in Christianity about possession and being possessed by something. It's a complete misunderstanding. what's actually happening there when things go wrong is we're made up of a lot of stuff. And when something that we're made up of, a part of us, a soul fragment, if you will, that we're made up of is strong in us, and that gets demonized, well, it's not you have a demon in you. It's someone has looked at you and seen a part of you as a demon. And they have demonized you, right? At the draconic scale, one can see, a much larger scale of everything. And the vision that I was kind of given of this is a humongous dragon raking its claws across the landscape of this reality. Only, like, at the human being scale, we're down in one of the tiniest, like, down in the trench, right, that the dragon leaves behind. And we're way down in that trench, so we don't even realize there's a trench there. We're so small. A single human being is so small in comparison, in terms of the difference between us and a draconic soul, which is, again, made up of many, many souls, and many, many human souls can be part of a draconic soul and are being built up into these draconic souls. And we are all together. We're shaping the reality that we're in just by living. But say just a huge actually group of like-minded human beings might just be the tippy tip of a claw on the draconic soul, right? That is digging down into the earth, digging down into the matter of things, and is shaping it, right? A single human is so small on that scale that we can't even perceive that the raking of the dragon's claws through the matter is just one little claw raking through the matter. We can't even perceive that. To us, it looks like a whole reality around us, a whole existence around us, okay? It's much like human beings looking at ants and going, these ants aren't even aware of the whole world, right? It's much the same from a higher perspective where the draconic energies operate from and where that awareness sits, okay? That awareness sits, and that awareness is able to act at that level, okay? And we are part of it, so we are acting at that level. We act at that level from our subconscious. We act at that level in our dream state, okay? We're forming up at that level into soul groups that are, clumping together and becoming, and not even becoming so much as realizing. We're remembering right now. The dragon, there's a sense of sleeping dragons that have been asleep, and we're waking up, and the dragons are starting to stir. And when a dragon stirs and it starts to create, it can shape a whole reality just with one swipe of its claw, just one lash of its tail, right? It can, melt things down so that they can be reshaped with its breath. Just one breath. It doesn't take that much at that scale for things to be changed, for things to be moved. And that's what's happening right now. And so at the same time, from a very similar level of reality, this draconian energy has solidified an edifice, especially rooted here on Earth, of fear and worry, of separation, a sense of an overwhelming sense of the best word that that comes to mind for it is divorce. A sense of the divorcing of self from self, the divorcing of soul from soul, right? The opposite, the very opposite of what the draconic energies do. Okay, and excuse me. Again, there's a brand of Christianity that has fed into that is fed into fear and worry, that is all about, foretelling an apocalypse and worrying about an apocalypse and preparing for an apocalypse and being completely circumvented in its energies from, instead of building up something, if you actually read, say, one of the few writers who actually, wrote something in the New Testament Bible that we can pretty much verify is the Apostle Paul. I have strong connections with the Apostle Paul. There are some books of the Bible that are supposedly written by Paul that were not written by Paul. There are other books that were. And there's, a specific part of what Paul talked about. And he had a vision that was a draconic vision, okay? It was a draconic vision of what he called the body of Christ and it being built up. Now, that is old news now, and those energies have dissipated in strength. Those energies, that impulse, in terms of its Christian source, is all but gone. Okay, you have to understand that it's all but gone. This has been coming through for several years for me. The so-called church age is over. I'm not saying there won't be churches. I'm not saying that there won't be church buildings. I'm not saying there won't be people who call themselves Christians. But the church age is over. We have reached the end of all that. The positive influences coming from that have all but dissipated. And, that's kind of a sad situation that has happened, because those energies have all been channeled into fear and worry and into building up these edifices of fear and worry that these draconian energies have been feeding upon. And it's a false dragon. It's a false beast. It's falseness, right? It's very connected to an idea from the Bible that I will talk about, which is the idea of the man of sin. The man of sin is the one who acts in negative ways, that acts in these draconian ways, acts in complete selfishness, and then lies about it and covers its tracks and continually schemes, if you will. It's a lot of scheming energy. It's a lot of always trying to pull energies towards oneself, always trying to shift the outcomes of things into one's own particular desired outcomes at the expense of others. The current economic systems are this way. The systems behind the wars that we're having are this way. The systems behind the technologies we're developing versus the technologies that are not being allowed to be developed that would truly benefit all of humanity are this way. And at the more personal level, these energies are energies that they're energies of older generations eating everything up and gathering everything up at the expense of the younger generations, at the expense of the children, the next generation who are coming into adulthood, the next generation who are raising children, and so on. It's energies of fear, so that therefore I have to hoard. I have to, we see it in when things go a certain way and, a bunch of people are buying a bunch of toilet paper and and then nobody can go buy toilet paper. It's that impulse, right? It's the impulse of, I don't care what happens to anybody else. I'm going to take care of myself. And this energy has, frankly, the American society is pretty much bound up with this energy at its foundation. And it's being revealed right now. And overall, worldwide, this energy is at the root of everything. And this gets into talking about different levels of awareness, the different dimensions, what you would call spiritual warfare, if from a Christian perspective, what the druids realized was something to be starved, okay? If we feed all these impulses, they grow. The draconian energies, if we feed that draconian hunger, that fear, that worry, that readiness to separate, that readiness to demonize, that readiness to drive others away, that readiness to not call things the way they actually are so that one can scheme and manipulate and get what one wants for oneself, even at the expense of one's own children, even at the expense of one's elders, even at the expense of one's country. And this is what's happened, and the leaders that we've chosen, even the leaders that we had to choose from in the United States in this last election, were by and large mostly both in this draconian energy. This is why it felt so bad for people who are awakened, and you might have felt like, I don't know who to vote for. And it really, honestly, it almost didn't matter, because, look at what's going on right now. We have a outgoing president who has the same policies of the president that would have come in had the election gone a different way. And what are those? What is that power structure serving? It's serving dropping more bombs, getting as close as we can to warfare that is, has the potential of wiping out most of the planet. I'm going to be careful of keywords here because of the YouTube algorithms, and I'm probably already shadow banned, but I don't really care, but you understand me, right? So, yeah, that's what's going on. These are the two things that are at war. And I've been saying this for months now, and the message is not going to change. See, some people think because an election has happened in the United States, they think, and a lot of these people are in the spiritual community. A lot of these people are some of the most well-known people in the spiritual community, and I love you all, but you're gonna find yourselves waking up over the next few years. I hope you're gonna see it. I hope you're gonna understand what you've been playing into, because if you've taken one side or the other in this whole thing, you've not actually taken the right side, because what you've done is you've played into both sides that are playing about fear and worry, right? Both sides are about fear and worry. They're just coming at it from a different standpoint. They're both about fear and worry. And we're going to see that play out. We're seeing the current power structure is trying their darndest to make some really terrible things happen. And the other side coming in wants those same terrible things to happen, but just in a different location in the world. They want those same terrible things to happen, but just in a different location in the world. You have to understand this. The draconian energies don't care where it happens. Get it? They don't care who it happens to. They just want it to happen. Because the biggest, worst thing that can happen, if it happens, is going to cause this massive fear and worry. This massive surge of refugees, of displaced people, of worried children, of mothers without, any men around them to help take care of them, of men who are just out for themselves, just trying to survive, of children just caught in the doldrums of what's happening. That's what these energies are trying to produce. And we're on a timeline where it's those types of events are not just possible, they're very probable. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. Again, making predictions about very specific things happening, well, that's about you choosing what timeline you want to be on. That's about the person making the prediction more than anybody who hears them. That's about you choosing. And if others want to agree with that and they think, oh yes, that prediction is probably going to happen, well, they're just running to your energies. And if your predictions are based in fear and worry, well then, guess what? That's what's coming about, fear and worry. Well, we've been headed on a path of fear and worry for so long that this is where we're headed. And there's several ways we can get there, but that's the trajectory, okay? There is light on the other side of that for humanity, and there keep being turnoffs. There are turnoffs all along the way, okay? And this comes through whenever I'm out in the woods. There are turnoffs. I see it in nature, okay? When a tree is growing and it finds that it can't get sunlight here, it can branch out and reach out to a place where it can get sunlight. And we have opportunities still. There are still opportunities for us to branch out to the light, to branch away from fear and worry, okay? And this is what's so important, and this is why this message is not about fear and worry. This message, if you're hearing it, is not about fear and worry. It's about recognizing the trajectory we're actually on and recognizing that we can shift it. We can move it. Okay? But we have to move it here first. We have to move it here first. We have to move it internally in ourselves first. If we stick on this path of fear and worry, if we look at the news and we're dead certain that, oh, this is going to happen over in, in Europe, in Ukraine, with Russia, and so on. If we're so sure this or that's going to happen with China, if we're so sure in our hearts, in our minds, that these things are going to happen in the Middle East, say, then that's where we're going to head to. That's where we're going to go. When you drive a car, you tend to go where you're looking. And this is why it's important to keep your eyes moving and not get fixated on one point. If you get fixated on the side of the road long enough, eventually you're going to drive off the road. And if you keep going in that direction, you're going to go all the way off the road. And then you're not on the road anymore. And then you're hitting a tree or you're in a ditch or whatever happens, right? It's the same way. And on the other hand, if we see a turnoff, we got to look at the turnoff and we got to fixate on the turnoff. We got to fixate on things like love, on things like peace, on even the worst people coming to some kind of awareness, right? That the world can be different. We need to imagine that as possible. Those of us who want that world, we have to start imagining that that's possible. That even the worst people among us, even if you don't like the new crop of leadership that's coming this next year, say in the United States, if you're convinced that the worst things are going to happen, well, that's what's going to happen. That's the timeline you're going to be on. The more of us who get off of that expectation, the closer we can get to something new happening. On the other hand, I got to tell you, it doesn't really matter which crop of leadership we got in this last election. They were both headed in these bad trajectories, in these very negative trajectories, okay? It's really hard to change that. It's really hard to switch away from that timeline, okay? It's something you can do potentially for yourself as an individual. It's really hard to shift the whole timeline a different way. Okay? It's really hard to shift whole clumps of people. And that's the conundrum we're up against. And so the degree to which you want to experience the darker, denser timelines to get to the light, to get to the love, to get to the peace. That's what you're going to see. The degree to which you don't want to experience all that to get to the love, to get to the peace, to get to the light, the more you're going to experience that. And that's how it works. And we're doing that from a place that, again, is down in this trench where the dragon rakes its claws. And it can change drastically with just one raking of the claws. A whole new channel can open up. All new things can open up, okay? If we look for them. And that's really the down deep of this message. That's what we need to be imagining and looking for. We have to first find it in ourselves. We have to find the capacity for it in ourselves. It's not going to happen by demonizing other people who you imagine think differently than you, or who you know think differently than you. It's not going to happen that way. Excuse me. Oh, big yawn coming from somewhere. Yeah, there's a different energy coming in there, a softer energy. That's what we need to look for, is our softer energy. We need to soften our eyes. That's one way that we can tell when we're out in the world and we have soft eyes towards other human beings. I've been struggling with this myself, just as a day-to-day annoyance sometimes. When you're driving around town, say, sometimes just the day-to-day grind, right, can get us hardened up. That's where the real challenge starts. In actuality, that's where the real challenge starts. It starts with actually taking our eyes off of this, what is portrayed as the big picture in the media, online, and refocusing on our day-to-day lives, refocusing on the people around us, refocusing on ourselves, on our own happiness, on the happiness of the people around us, on our communities. That is going to change things. That is going to shift things more than anything. Because the other way is where the fear and worry lie. All right? This whole looking out at the world and all the fear, all the worry, all the horrible thing that might happen. Right? And, you know, I was viewing from the ethers and through the ethers last night, as Spirit had me do, and there are overlapping potentialities right now. It's the best way I can describe it, okay? There are overlapping potentialities. And it just takes a small shift of our viewpoint to go from looking at a particular one to looking at another one. And what I was given was to not look at the too fiery, right? If you don't want the world to explode, if that's not the reality you want, then don't be fixated on the fiery, explosive energies, because that's where you're going to end up, okay? On the other hand, there's some really dense, deep, dark energies, and there's somewhere in the middle. Everything's kind of rosy orange. That's what I got. Everything's kind of rosy and orange, somewhere in the middle. And I know maybe some will go, oh, you know, you're looking through rose-colored glasses. Yeah, maybe. But that's kind of the message, is to look for that. Look for that rosier, little more orangey, rosy, less bright and intense. Also, not deep, dense, dark with all kinds of black swirls through it, okay? There was this range. And there's a turnoff. There's a turnoff right now. I don't know. I'm not going to make a prediction about what it is, because there's no one thing. It's collectively us collectively looking at what's happening in the world, realizing what we're headed towards, and then seeing that truly. Again, the Draconian energies don't want that. The Draconian energies want us to see fear and worry and then fixate on it and then just crashing into it like a brick wall. Or even to veer away from it, and then we're just veering away so quickly and not paying attention, and we're out of control. We veer into another brick wall, or we go down a hill, or we go off a cliff, right? The Draconian energies don't care which one of those things happen. They hit the brick wall, go off the cliff, they don't give a fuck, okay? Because either way, a bunch of humanity is despondent and down and in deep, dark trouble when they don't have to be, and the Draconian energies feed off that shit, okay? They just feed off of it. The Draconic energies, not that way. The Draconic energy is careful. The Draconic energy is like, just one scoop here in exactly this way, very measured out, and that's it. We did it, and we're done. And now it's changed, and now it's better. Now there's a channel here where there didn't used to be, and energy can flow this way, and it can come out this way, and now we channel and we keep going, and it's much more gradual, and it's not reactive, it's not reactionary. It's not reactionary. Okay? So reactionary energies, fear-mongering and worry, versus, okay, let's just look at it. Let's look at the way things really are, and then think about what we really need to do, what we actually need to do, where we actually need to go, what we can actually change at the level of reality that we're at, what we can actually start doing in our own lives. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you can do all kinds of spiritual exercises. You can meditate. You can do candle work. You can pray. You can say your rosary. You can work with, prayer beads and other, in the Buddhist or the Hindu religions. I don't care. I do not care. You can do all that stuff, and it won't matter if this one thing you have not got settled inside of you, and that is love, gravity, understanding you can't fight gravity. You can only you can work with it. You can't fight it. Love is something that pulls at us, and it pulls us together, okay? And the Draconian energies don't want that. The Draconian energies don't want people coming together. They don't want that. Okay? That's the challenge right now. It just remains a battle against fear and worry. And it remains a battle to see the world differently, with the heart mind engaged, with the eyes soft and the heart open. Okay? That's the current news from not so far north. And if you think that's nothing, no, this is everything. This is a fork in the road. This is a stone marker where we can go this way or we can go that way. And it is set down, and once we pass it, we're past it. And it's not to say that there won't be more opportunities, but this is a big one. This is a big one. Okay? So imagine the best world you can. Imagine the best world you can for you, for your children, for the elders in your life. And aim for that. Aim for that. In your own personal life, in your own personal imaginings, in your own dream world. That's what's needed. I've been Jared Randall. This has been the news from not so far north. And I'm sending you right now so much peace, so much love, and all the light you can possibly stand. Okay, so Spirit's saying you gotta talk about all the light you can possibly stand. Well, I mean, the reason I say that is because there can be too much for us, right? So don't bite off more than you can chew. Light and gravity. There's a gentle curve down into the gravity well where the light sits, and there's the steep one. There's the steep one. And you can get to a whole lot of light and life really quickly, but it's going to be intense. And are you ready for it? And can your life handle that? Can your life and the people in your life handle that? Okay? If they can't, then maybe that's not for you, and that's okay. There's a gentler curve down into the light, down into, again, down in the middle of it all is a kernel of dark from which the light explodes. And that's inside of you too. A human being is a star. A human being is also a tree. Deep down in a tree is the darkest place. Deep down in a star is the darkest place. But that's the place where the light comes from. Okay? That's the place where the light comes from. They work together. They're actually part of the same thing. They're part of the same thing. So when I'm sending you light, and I say, oh, as much as you can stand, I mean that. Be careful. Don't take in more than you're ready for. On the other hand, if you're at a place where you can take in a lot, do it. We need it. Much love. If you're interested in that, reach out to me.